And at the beginning of it all, to groups of clay teenagers, then an argument begins until suddenly one of the boys sees another group of young people wearing Chidori uniforms. And in that they ask if the boys know a big, blonde guy, and hearing these characteristics, the boys deduce that they were talking about Hinaran, and speaking of him, he himself goes to the place and asked what's going on there, and hearing their size, the boys who were causing trouble decide to simply run away from. They are as fast as they can, and as for Hinaran, they turn to their friends and ask them to stop picking fights unnecessarily. But the boys make it clear that they were the victims there, and besides, one of the boys says that the one to blame for that confusion is Hinaran himself, because the guys who were causing trouble with them said that Hinaran had scared their kohai, therefore, they were there to charge him, and hearing this, Hinaran says that it is not true, and he saw the kohai taking. A woman slapped him, and tried to go talk to him because she felt sorry for the boy, but because he was very intimidating, he ended up scaring the boy more than actually helping him. And suddenly, they passed girls from another school. Then one of them drops a handkerchief on the floor, and so one of the boys quickly rushes to give the handkerchief to her. However, the girls ignore him and continue on, saying that they will no longer use that handkerchief that he picked up from the floor. They do him the favor of saying this while making a huge disgusted face, and already continuing on. They pass by the private girls' academy Kikyo, a prestigious and traditional school for young girls, while the boys go to a public school called Chidori, which is known for being a terrible school where only the most idiotic students of all are sheltered. And at the end of the class, Hinaran is invited to go to a karaoke. However, he declines the invitation, saying that he already has plans that day, and he then runs off to his mother's candy store, where he will take over the service from 6 o'clock onwards. And Hinaran's mother starts to argue with him about the delay in getting there to work. However, he reminds her that his school is very far away, so he is unable to get there on time. In addition, he explains that he ended up being surprised by the rain that suddenly started during his journey to the store, and although he is there willing to help, Hinaran says it is clear that he may end up scaring away the customers with his unfriendly face, but upon seeing his mother, she reminds him that there will be few customers because of the rain, so he should be able to serve the customers who show up, and already at work. Hinaran thinks to himself that he hides this job he has from his friends, because he believes that an intimidating guy like him would never fit in at a candy store. And when he goes to the customers, he comes across only one girl, who is eating a lot. Upon seeing him, she starts to get all red. At that, Hinaran apologizes to her, believing that the girl is actually afraid of his face, something not at all atypical for the boy. And upon noticing that she is a short girl, Hinaran deduces that she is still in elementary school too. But before he can start talking to her, the girl gets scared and runs away. And at another moment, Hinaran comments to his mother about the strange girl he served, and at that his mother deduces that he is talking about a frequent customer of the candy store. Upon seeing this, Hinaran warns his mother that if the girl stops going to their store after that day, it will be all his fault, and after all, she simply ran away when she saw him, due to the intimidating look he naturally has, at which point his mother tells him to stop being so hard on himself, and says that this is a bad habit he has that he should give up, and as for now, she says that she can bring her back by making even more cakes, so not all is lost yet. And the next day, Hinaran goes to school, but he just keeps thinking about what happened the day before with the girl, and hopes that she won't be traumatized by the interaction they had, and upon seeing Hinaran visibly worried about something, his friends go to his desk and ask him to tell them what's bothering him, but Hinaran just leaves the place and says that he'll eat alone during that break. And upon seeing this, one of the boys finds Hinaran strange, and asks his other friends if they also don't feel that Hinaran always creates a barrier between himself and other people, and that makes him practically inaccessible. And after class, already at home, Hinaran is approached by his mother, who goes up to his room running desperately, and in that he is scared by his mother's unexpected reaction and asked what happened. And she then reveals that Aguri is in his house, and says that she wants to talk to the boy. So he goes to the girl, and is surprised to see that she is really there, and in that, Hinaran already begins to prepare his apologies for having scared her, but the girl interrupts him, and says that in fact she is there to pay for something for him. And when he realizes that a younger girl is there giving him a stand in his own store, Hinaran begins to be in shock, while the girl, Aguri, apologizes to him for having left very early the night before. And in this case, that cake is just an apology for simply running away like that, but even though she says that, the girl is watering the cake, so he drags the cake to her, offering it to her, and asks her to eat it in his place, and although she shines at first, in the end Aguri decides to eat the cake in his place, because she could not resist that, so she starts talking about her sweet tooth, and deduces that Hinaran has noticed this in her, since he saw the dishes on the girl's table the day before. Having said that, she changes the embarrassing subject, introducing herself as Aguri Kaoruko, while Hinaran also introduces himself, but finds it strange that a girl like her is interested in knowing his personal thing. However, Aguri seems happy to find out the boy's name, but tries to hide it, saying that she already knew his name before. After all, she had seen him helping out at the store other times. Upon seeing this, Hinaran is surprised, because he was sure that they had met the day before, and besides, he feels more relieved to discover that she apparently didn't leave the night before, because she was afraid of him. In this, Aguri confirms that this was not the reason she left early. He then asked why exactly she ran off like that, and he then says that he was just embarrassed to have a man staring at him so directly like he did. After all, this was the first time a guy had stared at him like that. We will notice that the girl's heart raced when she saw him. Hinaran is even more confused, because most of the time people would be afraid of being stared at by a guy like him. And well, when he realizes that it is already dark, Hinaran offers to take the girl to the station safely, because leaving a new girl like her on the street this time can be very dangerous, and in that, Aguri asks to buy another cake before they leave, but as soon as she leaves the store, she tells Hinaran that she can go on her own from there, and having said that, she turns her back so she can leave, but suddenly, she remembers that she has one more thing to say. In this case, she reveals that she didn't run because she was afraid of him, because in truth, Aguri never found him a scary guy, and while they talk, two ill-intentioned figures watch the two from afar, and at another moment, Hinaran returns to his room and begins to remember the times when other people talked about him being a scary guy who pushes people away. Therefore, having received a single compliment amidst several negative comments, made Hinaran value even more what Aguri told him, and suddenly, his mother appears in his room saying that Aguri forgot to take the cake she bought before leaving. Meanwhile, those two men from before approach the girl with more intentions, and when she realizes that the boys intend to harassing her, Aguri asks them to let her go, but the boys insist on asking her to hang out with them, and while Hinaran, he runs to the place where he left Aguri in the hope of still finding her there. He then looks everywhere and doesn't find her, until suddenly, Hinaran hears a suspicious noise coming from a street next door and discovers that those guys who got in trouble with his friends the day before are on top of Aguri asking it. She is Hinaran's girlfriend, and as they continue talking about Hinaran, the boys start making up lies about him, saying that Hinaran is actually a delinquent because he attends a school for idiots, and so, the boys try to encourage him to stay away from him, and when he sees that the boys spread this kind of rumor about him, Hinaran finally discovers why people are always avoiding him. While Aguri, she stands against what the guys are saying and says that in fact, they are judging Hinaran wrongly by only basing their thoughts on the rumors they spread about him. So Aguri suggests that the boys try to talk to Hinaran in person to draw their own conclusions about the boy. Upon seeing this, the two refuse to talk to Hinaran, as they are not even interested in knowing the truth about him. Upon seeing that the boys do not intend to know the truth about Hinaran, Aguri asks them to at least stop spreading false rumors about him. But instead of understanding her side, the two boys try to attack her after getting angry with Aguri's last comment. But at that moment, Hinaran steps in between them. The two boys get scared when they see him and run away from him again. He protects the girl. As for Aguri, she is worried about Hinaran when she sees him with a head injury, so she starts to apologize to him. However, Hinaran makes it clear that she is not to blame for what happened, and instead, Hinaran bows to her and apologizes for having involved Aguri in that problem because of him. But she in turn thanks him for having saved her, and at that, Hinaran becomes slightly emotional because he never expected anyone to value him at some point in his life, and after that, they go to the station. And Aguri shows that she is worried about the wound on his head, but Hinaran reassures her saying that this wound will soon heal, and then he turns his back so he can leave. But Aguri calls him again and arranges to eat cake with him the next time they see each other. And the next day, Hinaran goes to school, but just like the day before, he still cannot concentrate on anything, and ends up noticing that he arrived too early, and instead, he continues thinking about Aguri until now, and suddenly, he notices a strange movement in the curtain of the building next door. He then fixes his gaze on the window until suddenly, Hinaran sees Aguri in that room opening the curtain, and it's strange that this happens after he was sure that the girl was from elementary school because of her younger appearance. And when the girl looks deep into his eyes from the other side, Hinaran runs away because he's too nervous to think. Remembering Waguri's sincerity, Rintaro says he never imagined meeting someone like that, because unlike the other people around him, Waguri was the only one who told him he wasn't a scary person. And now that he knows she goes to Kikyo, Rintaro gets another scare. And at another point, Shohei goes up to Rintaro and starts complaining about being glared at by the Kikyo girls, something that ruined his day. And suddenly, Saku and Ayato enter the conversation, and still, Shohei continues to whine about what happened to him earlier. At this point, the two boys say they were also frowned upon by the girls at the school, and seeing that not even Saku, a model boy, could escape the girls' judgmental gazes, Shohei becomes even more dejected. As for him, Saku says he hates Kikyo school and the rich girls there, but he also hates the idiotic and shallow people at Chidori school. As for Yato, he notices the closed curtain and deduces that Rintaro was responsible for closing it. And seeing the curtain close toward Kikyo school, Shohei says he can understand him. After all, having that view is something he wouldn't want either. But seeing that the boy misunderstood, Rintaro yells at him, saying that the reason he closed the curtain has nothing to do with it. Seeing his explosive and unnatural reaction, the students ask him why he got so angry. Chidori. Rintaro realizes he really did get carried away and apologizes to the boy for it. Halfway through class, Rintaro remembers the awkward interaction he had earlier with Wagiri when he reflexively closed the curtain in her face. And upon reflecting a little more, now with a clear head, he realizes he's done something truly unpleasant and deduces that she'll stop coming to his mother's shop after that. And although he's a little sad about it, Rintaro believes it's best to leave things as they are, as nothing good will come from a Chidori member. And well, at the end of class, Shohei asks Rintaro out again. Before answering, he checks his phone to see if there are any tasks at the store. Seeing he'll be free, he accepts the boy's invitation and asks where they're going. Shohei invites him to karaoke, but on the way, they encounter a commotion in the middle of the street. And as he approaches the place to find out what's going on, Rintaro discovers that Wagiri is in front of the school, waiting for someone. As for Shohei, he goes up to the girl and starts intimidating her, asking what a Kikyu student is doing in the Chidori area. Hearing him treating her with such hostility, Wagiri responds with a trembling voice, saying she's waiting for someone. Shohei continues to intimidate her and ask her several questions. Rintaro then goes to the scene and controls Shohei, telling him to stop scaring the girl with his incisive manner. As for Shohei, he starts crying with envy when he discovers Rintaro knows a girl from Chidori. And although he hates Kikyo terribly, Shohei thinks it's cool to have a girl waiting for his friend at the school gates. After all, that's something he'd like to have too. And suddenly, in the middle of the conversation, two other Kikyo students notice Wagiri very close to two Chidori boys. And so they run to her worriedly and ask her to stay away from people from Chidori school to avoid catching their stupidity. And as they leave the place, they bump into Rintaro. At that moment, Shohei tries to grab one of the girl's arms to force her to apologize to her friend, but the girl slaps his hand away, pushing him away from her. Then the three of them run away. As for Shohei, he spends the whole way to the karaoke bar complaining about what happened with the girls, at which point Saku reminds him that he was the one who started the fight. Hearing this, Shohei begins to show he's interested in learning more about those girls. But as soon as he realizes this, he drops the subject, saying he doesn't need to worry about Kikyo's girls. Meanwhile, Rintaro sighs in relief at being able to get out of this situation unharmed. However, he remembers that Wagiri went there just to see him, and this makes him thoughtful. But it doesn't take long before he starts to sabotage himself and deduces that in fact, she knew someone from Chidori and was there looking for that person. As he turns to face Rintaro, Shohei notices his strange expression and asks what happened. Rintaro changes the subject again, saying it's nothing. Upon hearing this, Shohei asks him not to scare him like that again, and then continues on his way. As for Rintaro, he realizes that's not true. He was happy that Wagiri might have come to school to see him, but then he remembers that the best decision is to simply forget her. Another time, Rintaro goes to karaoke with some friends. Saku asks if he's chosen his next song yet, but he's completely distracted and says he'll start looking for a song right away. When he finishes singing, Shohei is frustrated that he didn't even get past 90 points, but Rintaro tries to reassure him, saying he did well anyway. However, Shohei reminds him that without a high score, his performance is worthless. Meanwhile, Saku remains worried about Rintaro, asking if nothing really happened to him these past few days. Seeing his friends willing to listen, Rintaro wonders whether or not he should tell them the truth. If he tells them he likes Wagiri, they'll probably remind him that the girl is Kikyo's, so he should forget about her, while he understands his friend's feelings. Rintaro doesn't want to risk hearing anything unpleasant directed at Wagiri, so he lies to his friends, telling them everything is fine. After finishing karaoke, Rintaro returns home with a sore throat from singing so much. When he arrives in front of his mother's shop, Rintaro finds it strange that it's still open, even though it should have closed long ago. As soon as he enters the house, he complains to his mother about leaving the shop door open. But as soon as he says this, he runs into Wagiri and asks why she's there at his house at this hour. She begins the conversation by apologizing for what she did earlier. After all, she underestimated the feud between Chidori and Kikyo when she just happened to show up in front of his school. Seeing her so worried about it, Rintaro makes it clear that he didn't mind her showing up at his school at all. Suddenly, the two are interrupted by Rintaro's mother, who complains about the boy taking so long on the street. After all, Wagiri was there all that time just waiting for him to arrive. During their conversation, Wagiri's stomach suddenly rumbles, causing everyone to laugh. Rintaro then invites the girl to eat with him. While she's eating, he asks her why she came to his school. Wagiri reveals that she was there precisely to see him, and upon discovering that she really wanted to see him, Rintaro is startled. And as for her, Wagiri promises that she will no longer act impulsively when she needs to talk to him. Rintaro tries again to make her comfortable with the situation, saying that it was his group that started the fight with her, and furthermore, he states that he was very happy when he saw her waiting for him in front of his school gate. And as soon as he says this, Rintaro turns red, not wanting to let out what he really felt at that moment. and then he apologizes to her for what you just said, because you believe you ended up letting something bizarre escalate. And although he tries to make her forget what he just said, Waguri says she doesn't want to forget it and asks him not to take it back. Seeing that the situation has become even more awkward between them, Rintaro decides to go back to eating and says he's acting strangely because he hadn't imagined seeing her at the store that night. After all, Rintaro thought she'd never return. Hearing this, she asks if his project was supposed to be something like that. Rintaro reminds her that they are from Kikyo and Chidori, to rival organizations. But even though they are rivals, Waguri says she was happy to discover he was a Chidori student. With that, she looks at the time and realizes it's time to leave. But before she leaves, Rintaro catches a glimpse of sadness in her eyes for a brief moment, leading him to believe he's hurt her. Suddenly, his mother arrives to talk to him, and when she sees Rintaro looking like a corpse, she begins to despair, asking if he's okay. After he recovers, Rintaro's mother sends him to accompany Waguri to the station and her house. As for him, Rintaro says he's still confused after what he talked about with Waguri, as he didn't understand what she meant when she said she was happy to get to know him better. Seeing his slowness, Rintaro's mother puts her hand on her head, making a disappointed face. Then, she tries to explain things more simply to him, saying that Rintaro is treating Waguri the same way they treated him, separating the girl from him simply because she's Kikyo's. Something Waguri didn't do to him when she discovered the boy belonged to Chidori. Realizing what a jerk he was being, Rintaro punches himself in the face and regrets acting like such a jerk to Waguri all this time. Well, the next day, he leaves home early to meet Waguri, and as soon as he sees her, Rintaro goes to her and apologizes for hurting her. After all, he could see it in the sad expression she made when she left the bakery the night before. And when he discovers that he saw her face, Waguri is completely embarrassed and says it's all her fault for her being sad, not it. However, Rintaro says that the fact that he's from Chidori and she's from Kikyo has always messed with his head, making Rintaro think they should hate each other forever, just because they're from different schools. That said, he reiterates what he told her the night before, saying he was indeed happy when he saw her waiting for him at the school gates. As for her, Waguri says she doesn't mind him being from a rival school either. After all, she wanted to meet him simply because Rintaro is him. Well, the next day at school, Rintaro sees Waguri again through the window, but unlike before, he doesn't close the curtain and waves back to her. And already on another day of school, Rintaro complains about the heat, and then Shohei suggests they go to the teacher's lounge to turn on the air conditioning. On the way there, Shohei complains about how boring school is that day, and says he can't handle it if there's nothing remotely fun going on. Saying this, Shohei remembers that the sports festival will be happening that month, something that, even though it's the norm, is enough to get him super excited. But as soon as one of the teachers notices the boy's excitement, he tells Shohei that neither he nor Rintaro will be able to participate in the festival. Hearing this, Shohei becomes desperate and asks why. The teacher then explains that anyone who fails the exam will have to retake the exam instead of attending the festival. However, Shohei reminds him that they haven't taken the exam yet, so there's no way to just say they'll have to retake it. Still in disbelief, the teacher asks if they really think they can pass the exam. Upon hearing this, Shohei confirms what the teacher had said, saying that he really won't be able to get a good grade on the exam. But even knowing he'll get a low grade, Shohei asks the teacher to at least reward their effort. At that moment, the teacher thinks of something and says he'll buy them ice cream if they both participate in the festival and win. And well, at another point, Shohei finds himself with his head in his hands and in utter despair, wondering how many hours a day he should study to get a decent grade. Seeing him in that state, Saku tells him he'll never be able to achieve anything if he continues like that. At that moment, Shohei begs Saku to help him study for the test, but Saku refuses, saying that Shohei managed to get a failing grade last time even though he studied with him. Upon hearing this, Shohei begs Saku again for help, making it clear that this time he'll really try hard. Meanwhile, Ayato goes to Rintaro to see if he's calm about the exam. However, Rintaro says that in fact, he's equally stressed about studying, and so he asks Ayato for help with his studies. And although he'd like to help, Ayato decides to be honest with him, saying that he also didn't understand much of the test material. And well, after seeing that Saku won't help them, Shohei tries to emotionally blackmail him, reminding him that he and Rintaro won't be able to play in the sports festival, which in turn will result in a worse team performance. But even after hearing this, Saku doesn't seem to mind their presence at the festival. Meanwhile, Rintaro receives a message from his mother saying that the bakery is having a sale, so she asks him to invite Waguri to go with him. He texts her, inviting her to the bakery, but she replies that she can't go due to her busy schedule. And well, after class, Shohei invites Rintaro to study with him in the school library. But while studying, Shohei gets his first reality check and realizes that there's no way he can study alone. Upon seeing this, Rintaro suggests that the boy apologize to Saku right away and ask him again to help them with their studies. However, Shohei reminds him that even though he received help, he still managed to get a low grade. So this is something that still bothers him, to the point where he feels uncomfortable asking Saku for help. Again, at this, Rintaro counters him, saying that this way like them. Saku is also excited about the sports festival, which means the boy is just being a little stubborn, but Rintaro believes that with a good conversation, they can turn this awkward situation around. Hearing this, Shohei finally realizes he was being immature and decides to go after Saku to patch things up between them as soon as possible. Before leaving, Shohei says he's excited for the festival because Rintaro will be there with them. And well, while alone at the table, Rintaro is surprised by two girls who start looking for a place to study. Upon seeing this, he gives them his seat and then leaves the library. And on the way to Shohei, Rintaro hears Wagiri's voice and discovers that she is helping another classmate with her studies. Just then, Kaoruko, Wagiri's classmate, begins to distract herself by drawing in her notebook instead of focusing on her studies. However, she says she usually only does this when she wants a break, since Wagiri is one of the top students in the class. Kaoruko suggests she avoid wasting time like her. After all, Wagiri needs to maintain her position as one of the top students in the class. After listening to the girls' conversation, Rintaro decides to leave the room and continue his studies alone. Noting that Wagiri manages to stand out even among Kikyo's classmates, he is surprised by her dedication and disappointed in himself. Unlike her, Rintaro considers himself just another piece of trash studying in a school for idiots. Furthermore, the fact that he failed despite having Saku's help in his studies is another thing that plagues him. Thus, Rintaro believes there's little he can do about the exam, so he gives in, saying he'll actually have to retake it. But suddenly, Wagiri comes up to him and says she saw him hide behind the bookshelf and listen to her conversation with her friend. Having said that, she asks if he's also there to study, and he in turn doesn't know what to say. After all, his studies are more like failures. Changing the subject, Wagiri mentions his invitation to the bakery promotion and says she intends to attend the next one. After all, she needs to save some money from her part-time job before spending all her money. Hearing this, Rintaro is confused and says that in his mind, she's always been a typical rich girl. However, Wagiri says that she's not the girl he thought she was. Furthermore, she makes it clear that she got into Kikyo as a scholarship student, not because she's from a wealthy family, and precisely because she has no money. Wagiri feels she needs to work harder than others. But upon hearing this, Rintaro asks why she wants to get so far. To this, Wagiri explains that she begged her father to let her study at Kikyo school, so she needs to keep trying so as not to betray his trust. Upon hearing this, Rintaro asks her to help him with his studies, because this time, he wants to finally say goodbye to failure and start dedicating himself more to his studies, just like her. And although Wagiri doesn't have time, she promises to contact him as soon as she has time. With that said, Wagiri prepares to go back to her friends to continue her studies. But before she can leave, Subaru, one of her friends, approaches them and asks who the guy with Wagiri is. As for Rintaro, he notices the girl's silver hair and assumes she's a foreigner, which he finds cool. At this, Subaru, with a look of contempt, asks if Rintaro is from Chidori, and he in turn answers, confirming that he is. Upon hearing this, Subaru becomes even more irritated with him and orders him never to approach Wagiri again. After all, she doesn't want anyone from Chidori near her friends. Hearing this, Wagiri tries to counter what she's saying, but Subaru cuts her off mid-sentence, saying he'll do everything he can to protect her from the Chidori brutes. As for Shohei and the others, they spot Rintaro from afar and call him to come with them. As he approaches the scene, Shohei notices Rintaro standing very close to the Kikyo girls, and they deduce that they've come after him with malicious intent. At this, Subaru decides to simply leave the scene and tells Wagiri that they shouldn't waste their time with those barbaric Chidori boys. Hearing this, Shohei becomes irritated at being called a barbarian and then begins to approach Wagiri, saying he's seen her face before. But at that very moment, Subaru pulls the girl away, and as for Rintaro, he steps in to stop Shohei from getting too close, saying it was simply an impulse in his body that he can't quite explain. As Subaru leaves, Saku decides to test her intelligence, saying she didn't answer a question he asked her a few minutes ago. He also finds it strange that she can go to school with dyed hair, something generally forbidden in Japanese schools. And since they have so much flexibility at their school, Saku says they must really be living the lives of spoiled rich girls. Hearing this, Rintaro says the boy is overstepping his bounds and reminds him that he's not the type to say such things. Furthermore, he remembers that Wagiri, who is with Subaru, is the same girl who waited for him at the Chidori gate. Therefore, he confesses that it was actually he who started talking to Wagiri again, and that's why they were found in the same place. And remembering Wagiri, Shohei decides to apologize to her for scaring her the other day. And as for Wagiri, she also apologizes to them for anything she may have done to them. And well, at another point, Subaru scolds Wagiri for apologizing to the Chidori barbarians. But right after saying this, she remembers that Rintaro defended them when Saku told them all about that atrocity, which makes Subaru start to think he's a minimally reasonable guy. Meanwhile, Rintaro returns home and tries to study again on his own, but finds himself making the same mistakes as always, even after Saku explained the entire subject to him from beginning to end. While studying, Rintaro receives a message from Wagiri, asking to call him for a while. As soon as he hears her speak speaking, Rintaro notices her voice is higher than usual and asks if something happened to her. To this, Wagiri says she's just calling to apologize for what her friend said to them earlier and says that Subaru is a good person deep down. Upon hearing this, Rintaro makes it clear that he wasn't mad at her friend or anything like that. However, Wagiri feels she still owes him an apology as she made Rintaro lie, saying he was the one who approached her, when in fact, it was Wagiri herself who approached him. And well, during the conversation, Rintaro notices that the girl continues to speak to him formally, something that makes him uncomfortable, as he wishes she were less distant. And before ending the call, Wagiri invites him to study with her that weekend. And when he feels like the girl is going to hang up, Rintaro hurries and asks her to leave formalities aside when talking to him. Looking at his cell phone, Rintaro notices they'd ended up waking up very early. He then begins to remember the conversation he had with Wagiri the other day, when she had promised to help him with his studies. And since then, Rintaro reports feeling the days pass more quickly. And well, already in the train car, Rintaro starts being stared at by a girl. The girl's friend advises her not to stare at Rintaro for too long, as he has a very intimidating face. As for him, Rintaro tenses up when he remembers he's meeting Wagiri, feeling as if he's going on a date with her, especially since they're doing it on a weekend. He begins to analyze his own outfit, wondering if he looks presentable. And although he's seeing the same landscape he's seen for years, Rintaro feels like he's in a completely different world, simply because he's meeting Wagiri alone. Realizing he's arrived too early, Rintaro decides to find something to pass the time. However, he notices that Wagiri also arrived early. He apologizes, believing he's kept her waiting for too long, but Wagiri reminds him that she was the one who arrived early. As they talk, Rintaro notices her speaking formally to him, something Rintaro has already asked her to stop. Wagiri then says she's just not used to speaking naturally to him. After all, she still feels nervous around him. Hearing this, Rintaro says he understands her, but he speaks formally, just like her. Moving on, they go to a cafe to study more comfortably while eating some sweets. But as Wagiri chats with Rintaro, she notices he's very quiet and asks if everything's okay. As for Rintaro, he just admires the way Wagiri eats her sweets with genuine happiness, something he greatly admires. And well, after they finish eating, Wagiri decides to start studying, starting with math. Upon hearing this, Rintaro decides to get straight to the point, showing her the exact question he's unsure about. Wagiri gets very close to him to see the book, and then the two move their faces away from each other when they realize they've gotten too close. Wagiri apologizes, saying she got too close, but Rintaro says it's okay. And then they return to the question he was struggling with. But during the question, Rintaro feels his heart pounding, which in turn makes it difficult for him to concentrate properly. And while studying, Wagiri feels comfortable asking a question. In this case, she asks him why he's studying to avoid failing just now. Rintaro informs her that after the exams, the school will hold a sports festival, and if he fails, he'll have to take makeup classes instead. Therefore, Rintaro must pass this exam to participate in the event alongside his friends. With that said, Rintaro apologizes for disappointing her with his foolish motivation, but Wagiri reassures him, saying that it's not a foolish motivation. In fact, she finds his motivation very beautiful. Hearing this, Rintaro realizes that Wagiri is a truly good person, and as for her, Wagiri suggests that he really loves his friends, otherwise he wouldn't be working so hard for them. But as soon as he sees her talking like that, Rintaro chokes up and says that in fact, he likes his friends and not loves them, as she had said. But still, Wagiri says that in her case, she loves her friends, because they are very wonderful people and they make her happy, especially Subaru, who in this case is a friend she has known since they were children. And although Subaru had always been misunderstood, Wagiri knew Thatch was actually a good person. However, Wagiri reports that Subaru isn't a guy who gets along well with boys, due to some issues she's had in the past. And when Wagiri saw that Rintaro was able to understand Subaru without judging her, she was very happy with his humane attitude, and so she thanks him for acting that way with her friend. As for him, Rintaro is left speechless by these words. So, Wagiri decides to return their focus to their studies. And well, after finishing another day of studying, Wagiri and Rintaro leave the cafe and head home. On the way, Rintaro mentions that this was the first time he'd spent so much time glued to his desk studying. Upon hearing this, Wagiri says that studying is indeed important, but she advises him to always rest after a long study session. As for him, Rintaro thanks her for helping him with his studies. Wagiri then hands him a book with some notes on what they studied today. With those notes, Rintaro can review the topics studied and thus memorize them more easily. Seeing that she spent much of her studies taking notes for him, Rintaro is startled and remembers that Wagiri should also be studying instead of just helping him. However, she reminds him that she had promised to help him. After all, she also wants him to enjoy the sports festival with his friends, so Rintaro can tell her about it when he gets back. Seeing that his train is approaching, Wagiri says goodbye and leaves. Rintaro is left behind, feeling like he can't afford to get bad grades after having had all the support from her. So he decides to review everything he studied while on the train home. But before he can leave, Rintaro is approached by Subaru, who asks him to accompany her to a cafe so they can discuss something important. Once there, Rintaro feels an awkward silence in the air and wonders why the girl hasn't spoken to him yet. Until suddenly, Subaru finally says something. In this case, she asks if he's dating Wagiri. Hearing this, Rintaro is startled and ends up spilling hot tea on his hand. Subaru hands him a cloth to dry himself off, and she appears completely different from the last time they saw each other. After all, Rintaro always thought she hated him, so seeing her helping him with something even simple leaves him astonished. As for her, Subaru asks again if he's dating Wagiri, and Rintaro promptly replies that he isn't. Hearing this, Subaru asks what they are, but Rintaro is at a loss for words and assumes they're just friends, but at the same time, he sees her only as a customer at his store. But regardless of his answer, Subaru says he no longer wants to see Rintaro hanging out with Wagiri. Hearing this, Rintaro deduces that she still harbors prejudice against him being a Chidori member. She, in turn, confirms his suspicions, saying that's precisely why she doesn't want him around Wagiri. Rintaro then says he knows about the feud between the Chidori and Kikyo students, but he believes that's no reason to distance himself from Wagiri. Hearing this, Subaru says he understands. After all, he doesn't seem like a bad person. That said, she acknowledges that she ended up saying horrible things to him and his friends that day when they met at the library, so she apologizes for what she did to them and says she only did that because she always hated Chidori and boys in general. So, when she saw a boy from Chidori next to Wagiri, this makes her panic. After all, if they were seen together Bikikyo's teachers, it would be something very difficult to explain. After all, the teachers hate the Chidori far more than the students themselves, so if they discovered that Wagiri, the exemplary scholarship student, was involved with someone from the Chidori, she could face enormous reprisals. And seeing that she cares deeply for Wagiri, Rintaro asks why, but before she can answer him, they are interrupted by a child who falls to the ground after running like crazy, and Subaru rushes to the boy's aid. At this, the boy compliments Subaru's hair, saying it has a very pretty color. Hearing this, Subaru is speechless, because Wagiri also told her the same thing that the boy did, something she never quite understood. After all, Subaru was always the target of teasing from the other boys precisely because of her eccentric hair, something that always brought her to tears. However, Wagiri always went after her to comfort Subaru and drive away the boys who teased her. Because of this, Subaru has always considered Wagiri his hero, and since then, the two have become inseparable friends. Subaru says he's seen all the effort the girl has put in, especially her effort to get into Kikyo University. That said, Subaru makes it clear that he simply wants to maintain what Wagiri took so long to achieve, and to do so, Rintaro will have to distance himself from her. And although he understands what she's saying, Rintaro refuses to stop seeing Wagiri. Upon hearing this, Subaru says she expected the answer from him. Later, Subaru finds her alone at the table and wonders what she just tried to do. Meanwhile, Rintaro tries to study on the train, but he can't concentrate. Suddenly, two high school girls enter the car, but when they see that the only available seat is next to Rintaro, they decide to move away from him. However, Rintaro notices the girls wanting his seat, so he gets up and goes looking for another place to sit. The girls call out to him again and thank him for giving up his seat for them in the library the other day. But as they talk to him, the girls become afraid. However, Rintaro tries to maintain a gentle demeanor, saying he's happy they were able to study. With that, he leaves, and the girls completely change their view of him, as they now understand he's actually a good person. As for Rintaro, he thinks about Wagiri again, and feels Subaru has reason to ask him to stop hanging out with her. After all, Wagiri might actually lose the opportunity to study at Kikyo, something she fought so hard for. And the next day after the exam, the teacher raises Rintaro and Uesami's hand and says that the two students managed to avoid failing the exam, as usual. Upon hearing this, the students burst into joy for the two of them. After all, they can now participate in the sports festival without much trouble, helping them win the event more easily. As for the teacher, he burst into tears of emotion at seeing the two worst students in the class get at least a failing grade. At this, Uesami places the credit for his good performance on Saku's shoulders, saying he only managed to get that grade thanks to his friend's help. As for Rintaro, he's overjoyed with his grade and decides to text Wagiri about his great achievement. But as soon as he picks up his phone, he remembers his conversation with Subaru. Meanwhile, Saku bumps into Rintaro's desk and finds a good luck note left by Wagiri in Rintaro's notebook. Already in the classroom, Ayato picks up Rintaro's book that he left open on the table and sees a note from Wagiri stuck to one of the pages wishing him luck on his exams. At that, Rintaro pulls the notebook from the boy's hand, and then Saku reminds him that he himself had said he met the girl by chance. So he realizes that Rintaro lied, as he has been in contact with her all this time. He then notices Rintaro's silence and asks what really happened between him and the girl. But Rintaro apologizes to his friends and says he won't say anything. Amidst all this noise, the teacher comes over and tells the four boys to help help tidy up the classroom instead of messing around, as classes will soon begin. As for Rintaro, he takes advantage of his composure to apologize for his aggressive behavior toward Ayato. Upon arriving home, Rintaro regrets the mess the girl's no caused, but at the same time, he remembers that she helped him with his studies. So, Rintaro decides to text Wagiri thanking her for all her help, as it was thanks to her that he managed to get a perfect score on his exams. Immediately after sending the text, Rintaro receives an immediate reply from the girl, saying that he only achieved this result thanks to his own efforts. And then he remembers the moment she said she was helping him, only because she wanted to see him having fun with his friends. But at the same time, he also remembers negative things, like when Subaru had asked him to stay away from Wagiri, because if she was seen too close to a Chidori student, she would likely be severely punished. After receiving this flood of negative thoughts, Rintaro turns off his phone and lies down on the table, leaving Wagiri's message marked as seen. However, he can't reply to it because he's asleep. And meanwhile, Wagiri notices that he saw her message asking him what sport he's going to play. As he ponders the possibilities, Wagiri begins to drift off, imagining the boy playing soccer or basketball. The very next day, Shohei and Ayato notice Saku and Rintaro are very distant from each other due to what happened the previous day. Ayato then says it's his turn to try to invite the boys to hang out. Shohei tries to convince them to go to a batting center after school, but Saku cuts him off and says she won't be going out with them that day. As for Rintaro, he says he has plans that day, so he won't be able to go out with them. Hearing this, Shohei becomes disappointed and says his only goal is to have friends who enjoy sports as much as he does. As for Ayato, he notices that his friend is truly mentally weak. And well, when it's time to leave, Rintaro says goodbye to his friends and heads towards the exit. Meanwhile, Saku walks back home until he's suddenly approached by Ayato and Shohei, who pulls him by the arms. Saku asks what they want with him. Then, Ayato invites him to go chat at his house. Already out of patience, Saku says they don't have any pressing matters to discuss, so he leaves his friends behind and continues on his way, claiming he's just upset, but it's nothing serious. Then, the boys continue following him and ask if he is like this because Rintaro got involved with someone from Kikyo, and Saku, in turn, says that this is not the reason for his upset. In this case, he is upset with the fact that Rintaro does not seem to trust them. After all, he hid the fact that he was in a relationship with someone from Kikyo, which is alarming for Saku, as he would like to help Rintaro with whatever he needs. But he won't be able to do that if Rintaro keeps hiding things from him. Upon hearing this, Shohei reminds him that Rintaro has always been that more independent type of guy, so he probably didn't even realize that Saku was feeling this way. Furthermore, Ayato reminds him that Rintaro himself made it clear that something was going on with him, but he didn't want to say what it was, but at least he let them know that something wasn't right. And for Ayato, this genuine way in which Rintaro expressed his feelings is enough to make him happy, as it's already a big step forward. Considering Rintaro is usually a much more reserved guy than that, and although he's still hiding the truth from them, Ayato is sure he'll tell them everything at some point. Still anxious about the whole situation, Saku lets out a bored sigh, showing he's not entirely sold on the idea. However, Ayato and Shohei urge him to cheer up a bit more and suggest stopping somewhere for something to eat. Meanwhile, Rintaro's mother notices him feeling a bit down and assumes he failed his test. However, he makes it clear that's not the problem. After all, he got a failing grade. Hearing this, she suggests he's joking, but Rintaro confirms that he did indeed pass the exams. Upon hearing this, his mother starts teasing him, saying he must be kidding her. However, Rintaro makes it clear he's not joking, much less cheating to get a decent grade on the exam. Suddenly, Wagiri arrives and apologizes for arriving almost at closing time. Rintaro's mother then says she only has a few sweets to sell, as she usually bakes more on weekends. As for Wagiri, she says she's satisfied with the amount of sweets. After all, she's just buying a small treat to reward her academic efforts. Hearing this, Rintaro's mother remembers that the boy also worked hard on his last exams, and so she pulls him out from under the table. Wagiri is surprised to suddenly see him and asks how long he's been there, to which his mother hands him over, saying he's been under the table the whole time. With that, she tells Rintaro to go prepare Wagiri's order. She needs to get back to the kitchen after all, and when alone with him, Wagiri extends her hands to greet him with a high five, congratulating him on his test results. But immediately upon hearing this, Rintaro remembers what happened with Saku in class, when he discovered Wagiri's note in Rintaro's notebook. Although these thoughts bother him, he decides to keep it to himself and greets Wagiri back. After taking her order, Wagiri prepares to leave. Rintaro offers to drive her at least to the train station to ensure she gets home safely. But upon hearing this, she reminds him that he still has work to do, so she must make her way alone. During their conversation, she notices him looking a little down, so she advises him to eat something he likes, as it always helps her cheer up on those darker days. In this, she says that she usually eats more during breakfast morning, but as soon as she says this, she notices that she usually eats a lot at every meal, and then she starts to slur her words, saying she's forgotten what she was trying to tell him. And as for Rintaro, he starts laughing when he sees her so confused. At this, Wagiri deduces that she said something very strange for him to be laughing, but at the same time, she says she's happy with their interaction, and then leaves the store and goes home, finding himself alone again. Rintaro notices that his seemingly cloudy heart suddenly begins to clear, all because of the brief interaction he had with Wagiri. He then says that the girl is truly amazing and knows exactly what to say to cheer him up. And remembering the time when Subaru advised him to stay away from Wagiri, he realizes that he initially agreed with her, thinking the best thing she could do was stay away from her. However, now he thinks the complete opposite, because Wagiri is a very talented and hardworking person. Therefore, she is someone he admires and wants to be around. Meanwhile, Wagiri walks through the train station, and remembering Rintaro's smile, she realizes that this was the first time she'd seen him laugh like that, which for her was a beautiful and unique moment. Suddenly, she receives a message and her eyes widen. Returning to Rintaro, he's having dinner with his mother, and notices that she's made a more luxurious meal than usual. She tells him it's to celebrate him passing all the tests for the first time. Upon hearing this, Rintaro reminds her that she wasn't believing in him earlier, which makes it all very ironic. However, she makes it clear that she'll start believing in him more from now on. After all, she can see that he really seems to be working hard. But upon hearing him say he got a 100, she doubts him again, and only takes Rintaro's word for it when she sees his graded exam. She's happy to see her son's progress, but Rintaro reminds her that it's not a good grade, as it only just managed to avoid failing. And while he's right, she reminds him that as a child, Rintaro had given up on many things. But this time, he kept working hard until he achieved his goal, which in this case was to get a good enough grade to avoid having to retake a year. With that said, she asks if there's still something bothering him, and upon hearing this, Rintaro is surprised by her deduction and asks how she knows he's hiding something. At this, Rintaro's mother reminds him that she knows him very well, so she knows when he's feeling down. At this point, she hypothesizes what his problem might be, deducing it has something to do with Wagiri. But whatever the problem is, she believes there's no need to interfere, as Rintaro will find a way to resolve it. Furthermore, she says she's satisfied to see him happy and living a good life, so she feels she doesn't need to ask for anything more. Meanwhile, Subaru finds himself thinking about Wagiri when suddenly she herself comes to her. Realizing she's in the same park where she used to play with Subaru, Wagiri feels nostalgic, but then decides to get straight to the point, asking what Subaru wanted to talk to her about. After all, Wagiri says her sudden message caught her off guard, as they could simply talk at school. But upon hearing this, Subaru states that the matter to be discussed could never be discussed at school, as she wants to talk about Rintaro. Man, I was going to say she's annoying, but the girl has her reasons. Her intention is good, but the way she is acting is not so nice. But let's see how our cute protagonist will react to this in the next episode, and I will definitely see you there. I went.